good to have you here at the 6 o'clock service. Here's the thing. We're going to do some Q&A in a few minutes. So there's going to be a number you can text your questions to as I speak. I'm going to reflect here for a few minutes on a piece of the passage that we're talking about as a church. You can text any question that has something maybe to do with what we're reflecting on for the next few minutes to 56316. Just text the word questions and then put your question in there. And then Morgan's going to come out and join me, and we're going to spend some time unpacking those. So the passage that Pastor Ray so brilliantly unpacked today, I'm going to give you a few thoughts on it from my angle and hone in on one of the major ideas. But chapter 1 of Philippians, verse 27, it says, "Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ." And of course, the gospel is the fact that Jesus is the true Lord of the world. And while the world isn't singing that song yet, we are already singing it as the church, right? We know that Jesus came and died and rose again to give us life, and the rest of the church, the rest of the world isn't caught up to what the church is already believing. And so what's going to happen is what Paul is going to say in the next verse, which is there's inevitably going to be opposition because you believe some stuff that knocks up against the ways of the world, the way you do family and money and sex and relationships. It's all so different than the world that, of course, your life, it's going to bump up against things. And so Paul says, whatever the situation is, whatever happens, conduct. So how do you conduct your life? We tend to conduct our life good when things are good, and not good. Like, think about how the person you were during COVID. How did you do during COVID? Like we became morons during COVID, didn't we? We were looking for reasons to fight each other, to look smarter than everybody else. We were fighting about medicine and which tribe and group you belong to politically. I, as a pastor, had people telling me that I was supposed to stand up against the government, and then the next email said that I'm supposed to stand with the government. And everyone was saying if you got a vaccine that you didn't care about your body. And then other people were saying if you didn't get a vaccine, you hated old people and you wanted all the old people to die. And you had dinners that would blow up because people disagreed. And Paul goes, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel. Like, have the long game in mind. And I don't say this like proudly, I'm just saying, I'm actually kind of happy with the way that I ended up doing COVID, because I basically ignored both of those groups. And I pastored my church the best I could and preached the gospel the best I could week in and week out, because if I had chosen a side, then the other side wouldn't be able to hear the gospel. If I had chosen a side, then the other side might get this temporal situation figured out, but they didn't get eternity solved, because they would have shut me off because I already disagreed with them politically about a thing. So the long game was to conduct myself in a manner worthy of the what? The gospel. What's the gospel? It's like God becoming human, treating us with love, treating us with kindness, sacrificing himself for us. So you live your life like that, you will never have regrets. Because the long game is intact. And I can say at the other end of the thing, I can look at some friends and family or whatever and just go, I think I did pretty good. because I tried to conduct myself with kindness, took some hits and sometimes absorbed some stuff, but I didn't choose a side because I just wanted to be a gospel guy. What did Jesus do in the gospel? He became one of us. So instead of walking away from people, I tried to lean into people. What did Jesus do in the gospel? He forgave us. So when someone said something dumb about me or my staff or put some pressure, I tried to forgive them. Forgive them. Do you know that Jesus Christ says, the book of Isaiah says that our sins are removed from us as far as the east is from the west, and he remembers them no more. Can I tell you something that some of us need to hear? Jesus Christ not only forgives you of your sin, he forgets it. He forgets it. And yet, you hold on to stuff that person said to you 10 years ago. Conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel. The gospel, the central message about forgiving people, about entering into other people's pain. That's what your life is supposed to be like. So how are we doing with that? The long game is what we're supposed to have in mind in this life. I had a staff member that I had to let go years ago for some misconduct on his end, and his wife wasn't happy about it. And as they left, they started to kind of talk about me, talk about he's a bad guy. And people started leaving the church, and I started having meetings with people in my office, and they would tell me the story, the narrative, and I wanted to protect her and the family, so I wouldn't respond. I would just nod and absorb it, because sometimes it ain't your job to talk. If you're going to conduct your life worthy of the gospel, what did Jesus Christ do on the cross? He didn't talk a ton. He made 7 statements, but he absorbed the wrath of God and didn't try to justify everything all the time. Sometimes your job is to absorb some stuff and shut up. Conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel. So mining the gospel and all the different angles of it is how you figure out how to conduct yourself in this life. And so she left, and people left because of it. And we didn't say anything. And then 2 years later, she called me up and she said, "I'm sorry about how I treated you as I left. I made up stuff. I was in a hurt moment. I'm sorry. I actually need your help with something." And I was like, of course, because I not only forgive people, I have to forget. And so we conduct ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel. And then he says in verse 28, without being frightened in any way. The word frightened literally means it's to be like scared like a horse all of a sudden, like bam, and a horse runs away. And Paul goes, I don't want you, Philippians, Bayside, 2023. I know you're going to be distracted, because that tends to be the through line of how Satan gets to us. He doesn't tend to get to us just by crawling around and, I can see Satan. He's trying to get me. It's really evil and dark. He gets you through distraction. Just scroll your phone, dead scroll your phone for 2 hours, and he's got you. He's working 168 hours a week to destroy you, and you maybe put 10 minutes a day into your relationship with Jesus to protect yourself from him. How do you win that fight? So we get frightened. We get nervous. We don't know what to do. Am I going to fall to this sin? Am I going to get in a scenario? And we live frightened lives like a horse that's heard a bang. And we run out. We don't know what to do. So we make quick decisions and rash decisions and out of insecurity. And Paul goes, if your life is rooted in the gospel, then you're not going to be frightened. I don't want you to be frightened in any way by those who, what? Oppose you. So you know what you're signing up for when you become a Christian is opposition. People are not going to believe what you believe, support what you support, like what you like, unless you just, if you're not getting opposition in your life, it probably means you have a lot of Christian friends and no non-Christian friends. Because if everyone votes like you, talks like you, listens to what you listen to, dresses like you, thinks like you, smells like you probably don't know many people not like you. And so he says there will be opposition to your life. That's the way. Nothing about Christianity is safe. Right? Remember that great Chronicles of Narnia line? When Lucy asks the little Mrs. Beaver or whatever, hey, Aslan's coming around. Is he safe? I want to make sure he's safe. And she goes, safe? No, he's not safe, but he's good. Sometimes our life is too safe and we don't have opposition at all. Jesus never signed us up for a safe life. He said the world is going to come against you because they're not going to understand your life. And how are you going to react when they oppose you? Oppose your ideas, oppose your lifestyle, oppose what you would say Jesus Christ is the only way to salvation. Well, nobody in the modern era likes that statement. That is one of the most offensive things you could ever say. That means that all other religions by default are wrong. See, some of you are bored with Christianity. I told you all last week, go to Starbucks tomorrow if you're bored and sit in a chair and ask the Lord to give you a word for someone in that room and then walk up to them and give it to them and see how bored you are. You are not bored with Christianity. You are bored with your boring version of Christianity, where you think God is dead and he won't speak to you on a Wednesday afternoon. He only talks to you for 40 minutes on a Sunday and then it's shut off and you go on with your life. No, he is alive. He'll call you to scary places where you have the opportunity to be frightened. He'll get you to do stuff. He still speaks. I had a friend yesterday told me he was trying to figure out whether God was whether he still did some cool stuff or whether that's all just in the book of Acts. He was driving to a meeting. He's like, hey, God, give me a word. I want one word to walk into this coffee I'm having with this guy. What's the word? And God just goes, gambling. My buddy's like, oh, I like doing that once in a while. That's kind of fun. A little 49ers game, throw a little dough down. That's cool. I like that. And God's like, no, idiot. It's for your meeting. He didn't really say that. I'm adding that. So he shows up to the meeting, and he's hanging out with the guy. And then he's just trying to tell the guy that God's doing something in his life. And he tells him the story and says, hey, I was on my way to this meeting, and for instance, I asked God, what do you want me to say? And he gave me the word gambling. And the guy looks at him and he's like, I prayed to God yesterday that he would send me an accountability partner for my gambling problem. That happened yesterday. What? Are you living this stuff out? This is real. This is now. And so he's going, you're going to get frightened at times. This isn't safe town. You'll be frightened, but he's good. Jesus says you're going to get opposition. Are you prepared for it? There's a guy named Eric Liddell, famous story, Chariots of Fire, tells the amazing story about Eric Liddell that ends when he wins the gold medal, 400 meter in the Olympics, and he's a Christian and gets sent off to a Japanese concentration camp during the war. And Churchill negotiated for his release. And the day of his release, he let a pregnant woman go in his place, and Eric Little was never heard from again. Died in a Japanese prisoner of war camp because he saw in that camp an opportunity, like the Apostle Paul actually, to minister and tell people about the gospel, because now they're stuck with him all day. And he let a woman go. Would you do that? Jesus Christ says these words, and we rarely ever talk about them. Listen to these crazy words. Don't fear the one that can kill the body. Fear the one who can kill both the body and the soul in hell. You are going to get opposed. You're going to get pressure. You're going to get stuff for the 80 years that you're here. And Paul is going, that's just part of the deal. Did we pitch you something else? And then he ends it, verse 29. This tends not to be a verse that we put on our kitchen fridge. For it has been granted to you on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. I don't tend to get up here and pitch the gospel to you as now come and suffer for Jesus. But Paul isn't afraid to say this is where true faith goes. There's going to be a grind. There's going to be life isn't going to be perfect. But don't waste your suffering. Because it has a purpose. God can use it. You guys, I've been here a year and a half. You see me up here preaching every week, twitching my face around, making nonsense noises. Don't you think it would be easier for God to just take this thing away from me so I can just get on with it? I was up preaching in Modesto this morning. Modesto, California. Never been there. Might never go back. I'm just kidding. I love it. It was lovely people. But I shared my story, and the lineup of people that came and just said, I needed to know I could be broken too. You take all this away, all that goes away. Right? It's what Malcolm Gladwell calls the advantage of disadvantage. It's that most people that make an impact in the world have been through some kind of disadvantage in their life. Have had difficulty, pain, things that have gone on in their childhood. And that's not God saying, I wanted all that to happen. It's just, I'm going to use it now if you'll let me. For it's been granted to you on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for him. So, Lord, I pray that we be people who suffer well and get other people to treasure you above all things in our suffering, that we would always be people who conduct ourselves worthy of the gospel, worthy of it, in whatever circumstances that life hits us. In your good name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity right now for the next 1 minute. You're just going to stand up, stretch your legs, meet someone, say hello, and then we're going to do some Q&A with y'all. Here we go. Yeah. That's interesting.
My mic is on. Check.
Let's not let people leave next time.
Okay. All right, you guys.
All
let's
right,
get back.
here we go.
We've got social hour over here.
You all right?
Come on, you guys.
Woo!
It's time to do Q&A. I I got some really good questions for you.
Okay,
These are
great.
We'll actually start.
Oh yeah, okay.
no, go ahead,
I haven't
sorry.
seen any of these.
No, okay, yeah, so
we're
that's
clear.
the rule. If it's your first time here, Mark's doing Q&A. This is gonna be rapid fire Q&A. So we're talking like 30 seconds or less.
Oh, no, give me a minute.
Okay,
I can't say anything in 30. Have you met me?
We want to get through. We want to get
said anything in
through a
30
lot of
seconds,
it.
right.
Okay, we won't do 30 seconds, but we're going to try to scale it down.
Okay.
Also, want to get through a lot of them. We'll start with Philippians.
What's the 49ers score, just for these people who sacrifice? These people came here, which I love.
What is it?
21-7?
21-7.
Why are you watching the game? Are you a pagan?
He's got his game.
You non-Christian? No, I love that y'all came because I know it's a game and it's a whole football American thing. So I love that you're here. Good.
Great, that's awesome.
Yes.
We're going to start in Philippians. We'll move into some off-topic stuff. Remember that you can submit questions at any point in time. I'm refreshing my screen as we talk, so you can keep asking questions. And Mark hasn't seen any of these questions, none of them. So this is going to be really fun. Here we go.
And everybody know Morgan Truel?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome, Morgan. She's the best.
All right, here we go. First question.
Okay.
You talked about this a little bit, but let's get a little bit more practical. What are some practical, simple, everyday things that we can do to go a long way in conducting ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel?
Yeah, really good. First, understanding the gospel. The gospel is not everything. So just saying I believe in God, that's not the gospel. The gospel is a particular thing about the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. So just because you've sung a song about God doesn't mean you've sung a song about the gospel. The gospel is specifically about what God has done in the person and the work of Jesus on your behalf. And then our response to the gospel is faith. But our response to the gospel is actually different than the gospel itself. So believing in Christ, that's not the gospel. The information about Christ is the gospel, and then the question is, how do you respond to it? So first off, it's believing. So if you're looking for two passages, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 1-4, and then 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20, where Christ became our sin and we became his righteousness. I think those are the two best passages. And then John 3:16 on the gospel. So I'd say first, knowing what the gospel is, and then really trying to apply it to every area of your life. So here's an example. This person, I really want this promotion at work, and this person's kind of in my way, and all my identity comes from getting this promotion. If you applied the gospel to that kind of pressure, it might sound like, did Jesus save me by being promoted or having downward mobility? He was already God. There was no promotion that he could have ever had. And he took a demotion in order to save you. So why are you letting a promotion define your identity?
Good.
Right? So you can take the gospel, once you richly understand it, you can apply it to everything. This is why I shouldn't be offended. This is why I should forgive that guy who said that thing to me 10 years ago. This is why I shouldn't care about things at work. I mean, you should care about things at work, but in a bad way. This is why this relationship should do this. This is what money is about.
Yeah.
When Paul wants us to be generous with our money, he doesn't say, now be generous, you bunch of losers, like I would do. He says, don't you realize Jesus Christ, who was rich, became poor so that you might become spiritually rich? And then he says, so you should give some money. Because that's what Jesus did. He gave up all the money. He gave up all the treasures and became nothing. And now you're hoarding the treasures and doing the opposite of what Jesus did in the gospel. So once you start understanding the gospel, now you're applying it to every area of life. Was that 1 minute?
No, but it's great.
Shoot.
No, it's okay. It's worth it.
Fail.
We talked slightly about political division, forgiveness. For those of us who have unfortunately chosen sides in these divisive times, how do we start by repairing those broken bridges while also being honest in the things we believe? I got some so it's a good question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's just basic functionality in life that you don't have to agree with everybody that you love and hang out with. You can debate anything. Debate a movie. What's the greatest film of all time? Well, we all know it's The Godfather, but you can have a debate about it. You can talk about it. We know it's Shawshank Redemption and The Godfather 2. We know those are the top three, but you can come and go, oh, I think it's Jaws. And I think that's a good, interesting debate. but we can still be friends. So all of this, I mean, you don't know. Have some humility. You don't actually know the best political opinion on anything. You're doing your best. You're scratching around in the dark. So if you start out with the perspective of, I don't have omniscience, I don't actually know whether my political view on this issue is actually true. You believe it, but you don't really know. And you're never gonna know. All knowledge, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, is like looking in a mirror dimly, and one day that mirror will be all cleaned up and we would see. But until that day, have some humility with your political views on whatever they are. Have some humility, and then lean into those relationships and say these crazy words. I know, I'm sorry. Just say, I'm sorry. And start to go, you know what, and start to get read some stuff on their perspective on it. Show them that you understand their position on whatever it is, and it's not just complete ludicrous that they believe this. Yeah. And those are some practical steps.
That's great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It's awesome. How do you forgive if the trauma was never acknowledged? Paul suffered. Did he just say, oh, well, and keep going?
Yeah, that's hard because, I mean, in the world of trauma, that's a whole other, the world of trauma is a deep psychological thing that I don't have the pay grade to speak into because everyone's experience is so different. What I'm talking about is general forgiveness that needs to happen because someone wronged you or did whatever. When you're getting in the realm of trauma and kids, sometimes you're going to have a situation where someone they're passed away. And so you're never going to hear those words. And so that's going to have to do with you and how you healthily go to counseling and get other people around you and understand the gospel and get that spiritual growth going on to where you get to a place. You know when they say, like, sometimes in sports, like a person I'll try to get in your head, and then like a week later I'm still in there because of what I said to you. And they say, I'm living rent-free in your head. I'm just taking time away from you. I'm taking joy away from you. So when you're forgiving someone, you're doing it for you, right? You're doing it so that you don't have somebody living rent-free in your head, stealing things from you. And that's the important part. It's your own mental health. It's your own physical health. It's your own spiritual health. To go, I'm just forensically drawing a line in the sand saying, I am not going to let that affect me. And then starting to try to draw up some other narratives like I had to do with my dad, where it's like, he dies when I'm 15. He never calls me and tells me he's sick. And I'm like, I blame him for that for 15 years of my life. And then I start to realize maybe he had other things going on, and he had fears and ego, and he had walked in and seen his sister try to take her own life many times. He lived with his own stuff because everyone has their story. And so you begin to widen your own perspective a little bit. Anyway, so that's...
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing terribly with these 1 minute.
No, this is great. No, the answers are great. So that's awesome.
You got the next one.
I got the next one.
You got the next question. What is it?
No.
Okay.
This person's asking, how do you stand firm and feel joy when it just feels like hate is so close? This person just feels like the world's weighing them down. It's really hard to stand firm and fight for that joy. Are there daily small things we can incorporate, practical things that can help that joy enter in?
Well, it's partly what Ray talked about today. And I mean, practically, if you're talking practical, it's the spiritual disciplines. Read Richard Foster's books, The Celebration of Discipline, solitude, prayer, study, fasting. There's all these disciplines that throughout church history people have done. We don't do them because we're modern Christians and we're like, we don't need any of that ancient stuff. We're just walking around with Jesus having a conversation. Bah. And it's like, no. For thousands of years, actually study and solitude and silence and fasting and all of these disciplines actually enriched your spiritual life so that you were able to have a soul that was at ease and rest in the midst of a world that was in tumult. It was Romans 8. It was like the world the creation is groaning in travail, but you have the Holy Spirit in the midst of that groaning. And so practically speaking, it's the disciplines. And then more meta than that is what Ray talked about. I thought it was a brilliant illustration this morning when he talked about the turbulence. I mean, I definitely paid attention to that one because I hate flying. And he got the turbulence and the plane's going, but then the pilot comes on and he goes, hey, we're gonna be out of this turbulence in 8 minutes. And everyone's like, chill, because it's necessary to have the perspective of the pilot. And when it comes to Christianity, it's like in the midst of the craziness of the world, when you theologically know that Jesus Christ is the Lord and he's reigning and ruling over all things, now you can have the perspective of the pilot. And that helps to bring that peace that Jesus talks about in John 14. So it's back to the stuff Christians have answered this question for 2,000 years. It's the Bible, prayer, fasting, silence, solitude, being able to spiritually get your soul set up so that circumstances don't kill you.
Right.
You know?
It's great.
That make sense?
Yeah. Can we go off book?
Yep.
Not off book of the Bible, but off book of Philippians.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Let's go.
Okay. If God knew exactly how we would live our lives and that many would not accept him or turn to him and just end up in hell, why would he even create them? I get free will and all that, but it just doesn't make sense to me how he knows this and yet chooses to create those who will not turn to him.
People have ended up in padded rooms over this question for a long time. A minute's pretty tough. Yeah, it is one of the tensions. I think, so it's a similar question to the question of evil, where philosophers basically go, well, how could God be good and allow evil? Shouldn't he stop it or whatever? And evil exists in its form because there's no way to prove that if God stopped every evil that was going to happen, that there's not a better situation that would have come about if he hadn't stopped. There's no way to prove that. So there's at least a philosophical premise that sometimes he may allow things so that there could be a greater good in light of that thing being allowed. So for instance, why is there a tree in the garden that gives the opportunity for people to disobey God? The reason, even though the Bible never tells us, and this is the tension of what's called theodicy, which is the study of the question of evil and suffering and justice, the Bible never tells us why God built the tree and gave the opportunity for evil ever to exist in the first place. But here's the one thing we know. It gave the opportunity for obedience without sin. So you even if sin never happened, obedience could have still existed because we were choosing to not eat from that tree. So in the same way, God has this beautiful story of love and free will and moving the story forward. And if he takes that away, you don't get the greater good of love. You don't get the greater good of sacrifice and courage. So he doesn't step in every 2 seconds and play the chess game of everything. There's a free will aspect of the universe rolling out the way it is. And what is hell but the will of a human being saying, I don't want to come under the lordship of Jesus, being expressed eternally. And God allowing you to have that reality in your life forever. Because you know people who are like, I don't want Jesus in my life. And then they die. And so is it God's job to go, I know you didn't like me, but come on. And so G.K. Chesterton said, it's a flag to human will.
Yeah.
And the rebellion of God echoing out forever. So there's a litany of issues when it comes to trying to figure out why did God do this, if God did this. And the Bible actually, the challenge of theodicy is it never actually answers a ton of those questions. Which like if you read Habakkuk, if you read the Psalms, if you read Job says why, and at the end God and his friends all philosophically try to do what I've been doing for the last 3 minutes. And then the end, God goes, everyone quiet, I want to talk. And he doesn't then say, let me tell you why I let all this happen. God says, where were you when I thought up giraffes? Where were you when I made snow? Do you realize that I throw lightning bolts around and you don't even know what lightning is? Because all through history, until our modern age, until the Enlightenment, until the 1800s, all through history, here's what humankind would do with these kind of questions. They would say this: they're so complex, the gods are smarter than us. There's no way for us to figure this out. And they would carry on with their lives. And then Enlightenment happened, 18th century, and we went, human beings are so smart. If we can't figure this out, it means God doesn't exist. And the Bible goes, the book of Job ends and he never answers them. And the one thing that we know, and I was talking to a man about this today because he came up to me crying at the church and he explained a scenario that was horrific and he said, where was God? And I said, to be honest with you, as a pastor, I can't tell you where God was that day because the Bible tells us he doesn't answer every single question about all of these things. But I do know that it's not because he didn't care. And the reason we know that, and this is different than any other religion, is because he sent Jesus. Historically, we can look, if you read any other religion, it's just ideas and esoteric philosophy of, but in Christianity, God actually historically did something that says, I actually care about you and I'm going to take care of this evil one day.
It's great. Was it,
I'm
that a pause or was that?
No, I'm done.
Okay, good. That's awesome. That was great. That was a great answer. Should Christians celebrate Halloween?
Oh, gosh. Cheapers. My youngest would be very mad if I answered no to this. She thinks about it all year. Here's what I hate about Halloween. I hate like the evil side of it. Like all the weird movies that come out and the commercials that I see all the time, and everything's like this weird, like ghouls and ghosts and demons, and that's weird to me, and I'm super sensitive to that kind of stuff, so I hate that. But as I talked about, I don't know, a month or two ago in a sermon, that guy Russell Moore talked about the idea that even growing up as a conservative Christian, Halloween was like his one time of the year that he would have a conversation with people about the spiritual dynamics of the universe. And it was the one time of year where people on a popular level would recognize the reality of evil and spirituality, and he would then say, this is way better than Christmas and Easter because now we're in it. Now we're talking about spiritual life and soul and evil, and does Satan exist, and does God exist, and your soul exists, does hell exist? Let's talk about this thing that's real. And so everything, Christians, when they run away from culture and hide from it, you never impact it. We're just scared of it. So I know people, they shut all their lights off and and the kids are knocking, give me candy. It's like, we're playing Settlers of Catan in our basement. I'll give you 2 wheats for a, I don't know.
Have you actually played?
Yeah, I played once.
Okay.
And we're hiding and we're afraid. And we should be embracing this as a communal opportunity, an opportunity to talk about evil, an opportunity to talk about spirituality and show that the gospel is a solution to it. And so I don't love the evil stuff because I do think that stuff's real. It's not a joke. And the thing that we often forget is real evil. Like people, here's what's interesting. People will dress up like Satan and they'll be like, and we're like, look at that person. But that's not what Satan looks like. Satan is like beautiful. And so sometimes we get distracted by like, well, look at that. That's ghouly and ergo it's evil. And it's like, your money can be evil. You probably have more problems with evil when you're looking at things that feel good and taste good and look good than you do in the ghouly things. Those are the idols that actually have your heart, and they work on a spiritual dynamic, which is why when Jesus says you can only serve God or money, he doesn't say money, he says the word mammon, which was the god of money, because behind money is a god. It's a spiritual dynamic in your life, the way you interact with money. So it's not just about whether you watch Friday the 13th, which I don't watch. That messed me up as a kid. I hate that stuff. I think there is a weird spiritual dynamic to opening yourself up to that. But I think conservative Christians have gone, well, there it is. If I don't do that, then I'm not dealing with evil. And then you become a materialistic person who's enslaved to money and you don't even recognize it. And they're all spiritual dynamics at all times. So at least I think it opens up the question for us to enter into the dialogue.
Yeah, it's great. What does the Bible say about women preaching in the church?
Good night. We're out of time. They said end at 7:10.
We have 4 minutes left.
Shoot.
Feels like a good 4-minute question.
Yeah, women. Women, yeah. Love the ladies. That didn't sound right. So years ago, if I'm dead honest with this question, years ago, when I started Village, actually, I had done a lot of study on this, and I had kind of come to the conclusion that it wasn't a thing, that the Bible had these couple passages where it said women shouldn't teach in the church, 1 Timothy and so on. So I was like, well, the Bible's the Bible, and that's that. And then I started, I don't know when it was, probably 6 years ago. One day I just started reading those passages again and began to realize that what the apostle was doing in those passages was very specific to what he was writing to. Like, so you only have like 2 passages where Paul has these things where he says a woman shouldn't, teach or preach in the church. But then you have like this large swath of stuff, like Ephesians chapter 4. He goes, people should be apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, but he never ties a gender to that. He just says, these are the gifts of the church. Apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher. He never goes, and these can only be men. He just does it in like this one 1 Timothy thing. So then I started delving into that, and I started realizing what was happening in that church in Ephesus was there was a woman called, Aphrodite, and she was a fertility goddess, and they were basically part of a false religion, and it was the false ideas were coming into the church through the women. So what Paul does is he goes, I don't want a woman to teach, but he didn't mean, I think, in no church ever, he was saying, Timothy, stop the ladies from talking because they're spreading a whole bunch of terrible ideas around your church at this moment in 54 AD, not in every church in the underground church in China in 2023. And not in every church. He's going, and then he uses, what gets us a little entangled is, he uses Adam and Eve as an example. And he says, Adam was made first, and Eve got deceived, right? And so then we go, oh, what Paul's saying is women are more easily deceived. But that's not what he's saying. Even if you read Genesis, not what he's saying, because it's fascinating. The serpent says, hey, Eve, take this fruit. And then it says she took the fruit and her husband was there with her, right? So this has been called the silence of Adam, that men are silently passive in life. And we will allow people to do things and we'll watch them do it and we won't call them out on it. Anyways, so he uses Adam and Eve, but the point is, so people go, see, he's not just talking about Ephesus, but I do think he is. He's just using Adam and Eve as an example for Timothy to Ephesus. He's going, Timothy, you got all these women and they're bringing in all these terrible ideas. They're so deceived because this Aphrodite cult, Timothy, there's a biblical precedent for this. It's Adam and Eve. The women are acting like Eve, so get them to stop in your scenario right now, not forever, so that Morgan can't be on a stage and preach because she's too easily deceived. It's like, look at her, she's so weak because she's a woman. No, that's not what he's trying to say. So those are your interpretive options. Either Paul means that women, and the other problem is then you read 1 Corinthians 12 to 14, and he says, when a woman prophesies in church, make sure she's wearing a head covering. Well, we get distracted by the head covering thing, and we're like, hey, it should be head coverings. That was a cultural thing. We forget the other point, which is, why is a woman prophesying in church?
Yeah.
We're so hopped up on make sure they have a head covering, we forgot the first part is, why are they talking? Because in the other passage, he said they're not allowed to talk. So clearly, he's not saying this is for all, at least in my opinion, he's not saying this is for all time, every church. He's constantly citing women that helped him plant his churches, fund his churches, pastor his churches. And I just think we've misunderstood this literally one or two passages, and it's taken a bunch of people out of ministry that we could have had. And now, I don't think this is like an essential Christian doctrine thing where you're not a Christian if you believe differently, right? This is one of those like in-house, okay, you believe that, I believe this. You believe the end times are right now, I don't believe that. You know, whatever. We have the debate, we sit at Thanksgiving dinner, we have the discussion, and we go on with our life. This isn't like a Jesus is God issue.
Right.
But I think it's a very important missiological issue for the future, that we would recognize that women have a very core role in the apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher paradigm that Paul lays out in Ephesians 4. And we out-Bible the Bible when we don't let them preach.
It's great.
That's where I'm.
Really
And I actually got up in front of our church in Vancouver and taught that, and it was all based on, hey guys, I know I've been telling you this other thing for 5 years, but I've been wrong.
Wow.
And that was actually super helpful for my church, because they found out that I was wrong one time about one thing.
And then it never happened again.
And then it never happened again.
That's really good.
No, but it was based on like me almost going, hey, I'm sorry, I kind of misread this situation.
Right.
And it was awesome, man. Like, people, if you do it with a humble spirit, people aren't gonna like split the church. I mean, some people are always gonna split the church over that issue, but if you go in and, hey, we're doing our best, we're trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
It's not like the church is gonna blow up and start going, you're a heretic or whatever. Maybe some of you will think that now, but
That's great.
okay.
Okay.
But I hope not, because we're conducting ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel.
Oh, good.
Right?
They were listening. That's
There you
awesome.
go, yeah.
I have one more question.
Okay.
But before we do that, I have one thing to tell you, two things to tell you, actually. Here at Bayside, Mark talked earlier about how we are people that participate in generosity. If it is your desire to give tonight, we always say that you don't give to Bayside, you give through Bayside.
Yes.
If you would like to participate in generosity tonight, we will have buckets on your way out that you can pass as you leave. You can also set up recurring giving at BaysideOnline.com or by texting the word GIVE to 56316.
Which for this crowd, do that.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great if you did that.
Text
And then
give to 56316 and give toward the mission of this church, because it's incredible what we're seeing. Every one of our campuses is growing. People are coming to Jesus. People are getting baptized. We got so much stuff going on. This is the busiest church. We got conferences. It all happens because you guys give. So
Great.
Please be generous. It's a spiritual thing that you're doing.
Yes. And then the second thing I was going to say is if you are a young adult within the ages of 18 to mid-30s, we are playing the rest of the game, if it's still happening, outside on the lawn, and we have pizza for you. So don't leave.
Oh, man.
Stay and hang out and build some young adult community. Okay, last question.
I see a lot of young adults out there eating the pizza, and I'm like, I think that guy's 50. But anyways, all right.
Yeah.
Which is good, which is great. You're welcome to.
Last question
Yes.
for you, because marriage conference is coming up this weekend.
Yes.
And you and Aaron, your wife,
Are married.
Aaron, are married, and you're
Yes.
teaching at the marriage conference.
Oh, yes.
So don't miss that. How do you know when it's the right time to get married?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, you just did this discernment process. You should answer this. What did you? How did you know that? How did you know? How did you preach?
Preach, woman.
Preach, woman. Get that head covering off. What did
Get that head covering off.
What did Benji do that you went, he is the one. I am ready to marry this man?
Okay, well, I think first and foremost, we both knew that the purpose of our lives was to love God and serve the church. Those were the two biggest
Love
things
it.
to us, and we both aligned on those two things. I genuinely liked him as a person and had
It's a good
friendship
start.
with him.
Yep.
And I think he feels the same way about me. And then I would say, everyone always told me, when you know, you know. And that used to make me so mad.
Right.
Because how do you actually know
Right.
when you know? I think the answer to that question, what people are saying when they say, when you know, is if you're in this and it's good and it's healthy, not that it's perfect, nothing's perfect. If it's good, it's healthy, and God keeps moving it forward, even in the times that you're not sure if it's gonna move forward, God keeps moving it forward, and it grows, and it becomes more like Jesus, it becomes more God-honoring.
That's good.
Then eventually, I don't know that there's like a bright, shining moment where God says, now is the right time. I think at that point, it's God's given me something good. I feel peace about this in what I know and what I feel. And now I'm going to take a step forward and say yes to something. It also helps when you're a girl and you don't have to ask the question.
Right. But
That's my month-long experience.
You can put a thread out, though. That was a great answer, by the way.
Oh.
I do think it's exactly what you're saying, and I think, as I've preached here many times before, I think we're all looking for the will of God, like, show me in my, in the sky, the name of the person I'm supposed to marry, and, let someone tell me. And I think what Paul says is very important. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, respect your husbands. I think if you have those things, whether God ever tells you, marry Benji, he's probably never going to do that.
Yeah.
So what he will say is, whoever you marry, respect him. Whoever you marry, love her like Christ served the church. That's your job. And we're constantly discerning the will by the personality, the connection. Are you on the same wavelength when it comes to Jesus, serving in the church? Probably should have a kid conversation at some point. Do you like kids? Do we want kids? What do we want to do with our life? Here's the thing. You got to have a mission in your relationship that's bigger than just you two being happy, or you will fight all the time, and you will, because it's like going to war and you have no one to fight. If you're sitting in the trench, right, and you're just talking to each other all day, and there's no Germans, sorry if you're a German, it's just usually Germans. I don't know if you've read a history book. But if there's never any Germans, you just start fighting each other because you're just sitting there. But if you have something to fight, you don't have time to fight each other. And so you need a mission in your marriage that's like, let's reach people for the kingdom. Let's serve people for Jesus. Let's use our money and our time and our house for the sake of discipleship, all that. And you're doing that, you're not going to have time to necessarily destroy each other. So anyways,
Great.
Okay, God bless you guys.
Yes.
Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.